How are we doing, guys? And welcome back to Tifosi Nation TV. It's time to talk about the Saudi Arabian 2024 Grand Prix and a Ferrari specific preview. Because as you can see, new to the channel, but I am a Ferrari fan. And I want to talk about Ferrari this season and my expectations for Ferrari this season. There's a lot of different things to discuss in today's video, and I will be looking down here because I've made plenty of notes on what I want to discuss, because there's a lot of different areas to talk about. The season in general, of course, the 2024 Bahrain, the first evidence of how quick this Ferrari car is or isn't in certain aspects. Saudi Arabia coming up and what to expect from that. The Leclerc and Sainz, maybe not situation so much, but the dynamic and how that's changed the season, and the early evidence of that from so far this season and how it can be managed for the rest of the season, and just where Ferrari needs to be targeting improvements over the season, because it's still a work in progress, this Ferrari car. I think realists realise this. I think most Ferrari fans kind of anticipated that we would be behind Red Bull to start the season, and the odds are, at this moment in time, it's going to be a long way back now for Ferrari in terms of getting to Red Bull's level. I think it was always a tall order, but we'll see. We'll see anyway, guys. Bahrain, Ferrari maximised the maximum possible result. Third and fourth was brilliant in the context of Charles Leclerc's issues and Carlos Sainz obviously having to come through traffic earlier on in the race through George Russell, and then obviously Charles Leclerc with his issue. Only 3 seconds off Sergio Perez, so not unthinkable. Max is in a different galaxy at this moment in time. We know that. But Checo isn't necessarily. In that Red Bull, Checo, there's still question marks. Can he handle a car over a 24 race season that drives so on the nose and is so unstable on the rear? That's a question. That's a question to ask. Bahrain's always been a strong track for Sergio Perez, so it wasn't no big surprise to see Sergio Perez in that podium position. Even though he had a tough sort of last 5 or 6 months of last season, it was no massive surprise to see him start this season relatively well. But only 3 seconds off was Carlos Sainz in this race. Of course, Checo was probably managing the gap for a lot of it. Maybe could have extended that a little bit more, but there's encouragement there anyway. And Charles Leclerc, without a brake issue, second place might have been on in Bahrain, but with those issues, I think Ferrari maximised the result. The strategy was solid, but race pace to Max is still, a decent way off. I think Max, it's going to be difficult for him to finish in front of Max. I saw this season realistically, but Checo is gettable for me. I do genuinely think that. Of course, he's got to be solid favourite to finish second in the championship and get the points for Red Bull to comfortably secure the constructors. But he is gettable on the one-to-one individual races. There's podiums in this Ferrari car. Has to be the target. It has to be the target most weekends, if not all weekends, is to be getting on the podium. It's not going to be easy because obviously McLaren and Mercedes, I'm not convinced Ferrari are that clear of McLaren and Mercedes at this moment in time. I think Saudi Arabia will actually suit the McLaren better. I think it's a track that just screams suiting McLaren really well. Fast corners, high speed. We know how much better McLaren have been in those scenarios than Ferrari and Mercedes. We saw it in Japan. We saw it in Qatar. Qatar's probably the most comparable track to Saudi in terms of speed and the sort of dynamic of the track. Japan as well. McLaren dominated Ferrari and Mercedes. So I'm expecting McLaren to be the faster of those 3 teams. I don't think it'll be the speed of Red Bull. I think Red Bull, this is the track that suits Red Bull a lot. Just like Bahrain, but for different reasons. I think in Bahrain, the fact that it's such a heavy track on your tyres in terms of how much it takes out the tyres, in terms of degradation, we know how bad Bahrain is for that, and it's not a track you can push flat out on. But Red Bull are fantastic at managing the tyres, and it still feels like that is the case this season as well. And I think that's where most of the other teams are playing catch-up. Ferrari, for a long period of time now, 6 or 7 races, have been level with Red Bull on qualifying pace. I covered that in another video as well. They're pretty much level with Red Bull on pure qualifying pace, but the race pace is where the difference is between the two teams. And I expect that to be bigger in Saudi. I don't think Ferrari will even be able to compete on qualifying pace, if I'm being realistic. I just think the high speed just suits that Ferrari Red Bull car so much more than Ferrari. And the race pace, of course, I think the gap was around 4 tenths last time in Bahrain. I think maybe 2 or 3 tenths factoring in Charles Leclerc's brake issue, but I expect it to be big again in Saudi, possibly bigger. 5 or 6 tenths. I think we could be talking, but who knows? We'll see. We'll see. I might be totally misreading this. I certainly hope I am, but I don't have massive hope going into this weekend. I can't lie to you. I think this is one of the tracks that probably suits Ferrari the least, but we'll see. So yeah, I think as much as third and fourth isn't a lot to write home about, it was the maximum Ferrari could have got last weekend, and I'll take that. Because it's the standards are low, to be honest, but I feel like the standards are improving all the time with the Fred, and I think that's a result. Third and fourth, in the context of what happens to Leclerc's car, I feel under previous leadership, Binotto especially, I don't think Leclerc gets fourth. I think they make a mess of the strategy. They panic when Leclerc has the issue, and they don't see the bigger picture. Fred sees the bigger picture. First 20 laps, there's an issue on the car. They rectified it by the looks of things, or certainly got closer to rectifying it, as Charles Leclerc was putting in really good lap times for the final sort of 30, 40 laps. Ferrari saw the bigger picture and has got the third and fourth place. And it's points on McLaren and Mercedes early doors, which is crucial, particularly if McLaren are stronger this weekend. We need to see where Ferrari are at truly on each of the different types of track. High speed this weekend, higher downforce tracks, such as Monaco, Barcelona, where it's maybe less of an emphasis on high speed, and tracks like Bahrain, Australia, where it's a bit of a balance between the two, if you like. Bahrain, I was happy enough with qualifying pace, race pace, still improvement to be made. And it's something Fred has alluded to be fair. He wants to improve the race pace, and just because he says he wants the race pace to be equal to the qualifying pace doesn't mean it can just happen like that. I was trying to click then. It doesn't just mean it can happen, like a click of a finger. It is a difficult thing to sort out because every single team is trying to improve on its tyres. Every single team is trying to improve in terms of tyre degradation. It's easier said than done. But the signs, I have to be honest, the signs weren't there in Bahrain, but that's not to say they can't be there in the next couple of races coming up because we know how hard Bahrain is on the tyres. Saudi Arabia will be a better barometer for that. That is the number one thing Ferrari have to sort out is the tyre degradation issue. It's cost Ferrari in 2022, it's cost them in 2023, and in previous seasons as well. It's been a big issue for a long time. Haas, to be fair, as I mentioned in another video, in the race pace video, do seem to have got on top of things. So basically need to appoint Ayo Komatsu and everything will be solved. But in all seriousness, it's not something that can be a quick fix for a top team. But it is something Ferrari needs to get on top of. If they can get on top of it, in terms of raw pace, we've seen Ferrari are not far off Red Bull. They're equal, if anything, on qualifying pace. Let's see if they can build a similar style race car. As I said, I'm cautious this weekend. I do expect McLaren to be the second best team this weekend and have a big jump up from where they were in Bahrain, a track that didn't suit them at all. And I think the Red Bull gap will probably be the largest it has been all season because this is the track I think that probably suits that Red Bull car the most. Last season, it was a track they dominated on the most. Max came from 15th to 2nd, and I think he was second by a long way on Alonso in 3rd. Checo won the race. It was a sobering moment last season, the Saudi Arabia race, and it was probably the peak of that Red Bull car. Not that it wasn't dominant throughout the season, but that was one of the most dominant race weekends in terms of raw pace I think I've seen in all my time watching F1, to be honest, last time at Saudi Arabia. Not to exaggerate at all, I could not believe how dominant that Red Bull was. And no disrespect to Checo, no disrespect at all to him, because he has been excellent at Saudi Arabia, but how easily he was on pole and the distance he had to Charles Leclerc in 2nd, considering he's not a great qualifier, shows just how good that Red Bull was and how almost easy it was for Checo to get on pole without Max out of the picture with his, I can't remember what it was now. I think it was the drive shaft, I think it was, that went in Q1, in Q2 or Q1. I think it was Q2. Yeah, it was Q2 actually because he started 15th. That Red Bull was an absolute monster last time out at Saudi Arabia, and Checo is a monster in Saudi Arabia as well. I expect a Red Bull 1-2 this weekend. I would be stunned, and I mean stunned, if Red Bull don't get a 1-2. I think the thing to look at with Ferrari this season is, can we go into races this season with a realistic chance of winning races? It's very difficult to say right now. Can Sainz and Leclerc always be in a position to get the maximum result possible week in, week out? They did it last weekend.